Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here for the latest Rootwurks webinar, Why GMPs are Crucial for Cannabis Businesses. My name is Ben Hartman. I'm the content manager here at Rootwurks, and I'll be your host for this webinar today. So current good manufacturing practices help ensure the safety, quality, and consistency of products in all types of industries, from food to cosmetics to all types of everyday products that we all have in our houses. When it comes to the cannabinoid products that many of us have in our houses, you don't have that FDA, U.S. Food and Drug Administration oversight. And you don't have the federally mandated regulations on cannabinoid products. So the question is, what does that mean for the cannabis industry when it wants to use these good manufacturing practices and put them in place for the industry? So in this webinar, we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about GMPs, what they mean potentially for the cannabis industry, and what it can mean if you don't have these sorts of practices in place. So to dive into all that, we got a couple of experts here with us today. I'll go ahead and start out with Tyler. We got Tyler Williams, the CEO of leading food safety certification training and consulting company ASI, and the founder and CEO of CSQ Cannabis Safety and Quality. Hi, Tyler. How's it going?
Good. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Always great to have you. Also, next up, we got Darwin Millard, the technical director at CSQ. Darwin is a 17-year cannabis industry veteran, also a volunteer member of the ASTM International Technical Committee, D37 on cannabis. Hi, Darwin. Great to have you with us.
Hey, Ben. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought just right off the top, for maybe there's people listening who aren't as familiar, and I thought I'd ask you, Tyler, how would you describe CGMPs, GMPs, and what they mean?
Yeah, certainly a question we get quite often. So GMPs are basically a set of guidelines and regulations that ensure products, like you said, Ben, food, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, etc., are consistently produced and controlled according to quality standards. GMPs do cover a wide range of areas. They include things like hygiene and sanitation, employee training, process controls, quality assurance, and a bunch of other stuff. But essentially, GMPs act as a safety net, ensuring that every batch of the products being produced meets the same high quality standards consistently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be everything from the actual makeup of the products to workplace safety and things that maybe people be more familiar with, just kind of across the board. In Darwin, so what are the benefits of putting these practices into play, or implementing them in the workplace?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. And well, the slide helps take the words right out of my mouth, basically there. But some of the major benefits, right, as it said, are lowering operating costs, having improved efficiencies over your product, and streamlining compliance, which we're going to get into here in a little bit more detail, mitigating business risks, which is probably the overarching theme here, right? And it's a way to demonstrate stability and legitimacy to the marketplace. Now, all too often, GMPs, right, are interpreted as being overly burdensome or costly and unnecessary due to the lack of regulatory mandate that we have right now within the cannabis space. But in fact, they should be seen as quite the opposite of that. They're really a tool that can be used to lower operating costs and improve efficiency and streamline compliance, as I was saying. And they help you mitigate your business risks. And a GMP certification is what gives you that, demonstrates really that legitimacy and stability in the marketplace, and really provides operators with a way to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And if they're not mandated or not required in cannabis, it's a way of showing kind of that, if I'm right, that they kind of gone the extra mile when you didn't have to?
Exactly, like you're going above and beyond your regulatory requirements in some cases.
Mm-hmm. So how does it help with risk management? Because you're saying that's sort of the center of so much of it.
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. So the way that it really helps and improve your business, right, is by having good manufacturing practices in place. You're starting to collect more data. And what data helps you with is having a better visibility over your process. And if you've got better visibility over your process, that means you can track down nonconformancies much quicker, which means you're being more efficient when you're having to deal with, say, the things that are, as I was saying, non-conformant, or I'm looking for a D word right now. Tyler, you can help me there. In respect to your processes being out of specification, or really your products. And
discrepancy, no.
When you're spending less time on those things, right, that means you're actually saving money. And by having more visibility over your process as well, you're able to quickly reduce your spendings on rework, which of course means that you're now focusing more on product quality and safety, which means you're going to mitigate any potential risk that might come down the road, such as like recalls or other things like that.
Mm-hmm. I think you mentioned, you'd said recently that they actually they can help make money. In other words, you have these good manufacturing practices in place. It also, maybe not just that it helps you operate better, but it's also just avoiding risk. You're going to save money. Is that?
Oh, absolutely. So that goes back to the efficiency of your operations, right? So I think there are really two ways you can look at good manufacturing practices. Implementing them is something that might cost some money. There's going to be a capital expenditure in that, but there is certainly a return on investment of having increased efficiencies and better visibility over your process. But what you also gain are increased margins on your day-to-day operations. Again, that's really the crux of why GMPs aren't just critical for ensuring consumer safety. They make good business sense, because you're able to operate more efficiently, which means you're spending resources on things that matter versus having to track down discrepancies and really spending that money in an inefficient manner. So again, lowering those day-to-day operation costs and increasing your margins is probably the most significant business benefit from good manufacturing practices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Ben, can I just add on to that, because Darwin's making some really good points here that, again, this is something we talk about day to day, and so a lot of times we get so focused on just explaining what GMPs are and the benefits behind it. Let's give some real life scenarios, right? So let's say you're a cannabis operator and you have no preventive maintenance program in place. What's something that's likely going to happen because of that? You're going to have machines break down. You're going to have more costs spent on maintenance. You're going to have, the manufacturer of that piece of equipment coming in and out of your facility. So maybe just on that one piece of equipment alone, you're spending $50,000 annually on repairs, on doing things because you don't have a preventive maintenance program in place. Preventive maintenance is a part of GMPs. So that's just one real life example where GMPs are. It's seen as, oh, we just need to get this certificate because of requirements or regulations, et cetera. But no, to Darwin's point, it's an ROI. Yeah, there's some investment up front. It's a very small investment if you look at it compared to what you're spending down the road. The same thing could be said about training, right? So if you're developing your people, you're training them because that's a part of GMPs. Well, you're going to have less mistakes happen, which turns out to less products, to Darwin's point, being reworked or wasted, right? So again, there's monetary gains almost immediately from implementing GMPs and these efficiencies that we talk about. So these aren't just words that we're spitting out. There's real life examples. Talk to a GMP certified facility and see how it benefited them. And I think people will really understand that this has a real big ROI on your business and isn't just some requirement that ASI is coming up with or the FDA is coming up with to put a burden on your business.
Mm-hmm. No, with equipment, it definitely makes sense that the more you take care of it, the longer it's going to last, and the less likely you're going to have to replace things, which would be a huge overhead. And then I imagine also just the constant sort of maintaining of like a hygienic environment, a clean environment would help prevent contamination and things like that, which then, things escalate. You talked about efficiency. I think the efficiency angle is interesting because I imagine when you make the case for doing these processes, people would say, well, we're already too busy as it is. How are we going to start doing these things? Or how are we going to put more effort into that? How would you make that case for from the efficiency point when you're actually, maybe it would sound from the outside that they're being asked to do more things. Whoever wants to take it. Tyler, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So how can it improve efficiency? I think Darwin touched on a lot of that. But how do I translate that into value for my company? I think again, the ROIs there. It's, hey, maybe you have to hire an expert, somebody who's familiar with GMPs to help you implement at the facility, whether that's someone internally or an external consultant, or using an external company like ASI. However, again, I think that's a cost versus benefit there, right? So maybe I'm paying an employee, and I'm just making up some numbers here, 60, 70,000 a year to come manage my GMP program. But at the end of the year, I'm translating that to 200,000 in cost savings from reducing wasted products, from creating products more consistently, so they have higher quality. So maybe I could sell them a little bit more. I mentioned reducing breakdown on equipment, improving on training for your workforce, but it also too improving your supply chain. So part of GMPs is looking at the bigger picture, and also what raw materials you're bringing into the facility. I think a great example of this was during COVID. We had many of our clients who were, they had one supplier for each raw material, no backups. Okay, what happens when the cost of those products go up significantly? You have no backup supplier ready in the wings, ready to go. And so those are all costs on your business. And again, I think GMPs gives you the foundation to help reduce those costs. And then really you need one, or and it depends on the size of the business, but really just one person who maybe that's not even 100% of their job overseeing the program. So again, the cost is minute compared to the ROI that you get on the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another great example, right? Let's say any incident occurs at your facility, right? And you have to conduct an investigation to figure out what happened, right? Well, if you don't have any data for what was going on at that time of the incident, like who was actually doing and performing their job function, or what they were doing at that time, how are you actually going to track down what occurred? Are you going to dig through hours of security footage? But then you have to figure out, okay, well, when did the incident occur? What block of footage do I actually need to look through? Figuring that out takes time, and more time than it would, right, if you had a fully defined quality management system like current good manufacturing practices are in place. Having that in place allows you to reduce that time, not to mention all those resources that you're spending trying to figure out what happened. Those are the resources we were mentioning earlier, right, that could be better spent doing other things.
Yeah, helps you operate in that way, in a much more direct and much more efficient way. What about the quality of the products, Darwin? Like, how does it, because I know in cannabis, I mean, obviously in other industries as well, but cannabis, one of the differentiators is obviously, if this product, this brand is considered to be better, or have, more high quality, effect and all that. How does that helped by better manufacturing processes, the actual quality of the products?
Great question. And so that's actually something that Tyler and I have been working on internally, right? How to really define how the good manufacturing practices improve your consumer safety, right? The actual safety of the product that people are consuming, and your quality management system that you put in place on top of that, that really is your overarching system. That is where we're really starting to apply those concepts of product quality, right? Defining real product specifications. So my grade A solventless extract, my live rosin, whatever it is always going to be a specific color. And it's always going to be the range of, say, the 160 micron to the 45, which might be considered full spectrum, for instance. If you're defining these critical quality attributes, which really makes out, really just gives you more understanding, again, insight of what that product should be, then you have to implement further good manufacturing practices, checkpoints along the way, so that you can make sure that the quality of that product, quality control points, for instance, is maintained throughout the entire production line. And that's when you might be implementing further procedures such as quality assurance protocols to make sure that you're actually conducting not only the quality control steps, but those were occurred and they were done at the appropriate time according to, again, either process or product specifications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in cannabis, I know it's I can see that as being a good selling point in terms of companies. The quality and the consistency, because you don't always have consistency across every formulation. That one brand has the same name but different brands, and doesn't always, for the consumer, it can be hard. And so if a brand can definitely differentiate that way, I can see how that would be appealing to implement.
Yeah. Ben, real quick on just to add to that, I think it's more important for the cannabis industry, especially for multi-state operators, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have this weird, unique thing about the cannabis industry where businesses have to apply for licenses in those states who have legalized. Right. And those who are operating in multiple states, they can either go after their own license, or they can, work with a company who already has a license within that state to create those products via private label, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is a unique thing to the cannabis industry that we don't see in food, we don't see in pharmaceutical, we don't see in medical devices. And because of that, it makes it really hard to have consistent products across multiple different states, because you have these different requirements implemented by the states. You have this, well, maybe I'm producing my products in my home state, but I'm licensing out to different organizations in other states to create private labels. And so by having GMPs, you get that consistency. I'm not going to name any names, but there's some big edible brands that are certified to our program, and they are able to roll this out to all of the companies and organizations that their product is manufactured at. And now they have tighter controls over the consistency of the product. So if I go to Washington, if I go to Missouri, if I go to New Jersey, and I try their product in all of those different states, it's going to be almost identical. Whereas not everyone who isn't following GMPs, they can't say the same thing about their products. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to touch on that, because that is something that's very, very unique to cannabis. Mm-hmm. And like I said, you don't see it in the food industry and similar industries that follow GMPs.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it's such a strange challenge, because you have like one brand, or let's say, but it's, trying to stay consistent in, let's say, 10 or 12 different states, each one kind of siloed in its own way. And then how do you keep that consistent with customers? It's just, it's remarkably complicated, especially compared to other industries that just, like you said, don't ever have to deal with that. Another, I think you mentioned earlier, we were touched on it for a second with compliance, Darwin. How do these best practices, how do they help people make sure that, if they get audited, they're not going to get fined, or less likely to get fined? Let's say.
Great question. Yeah. So believe it or not, every state that has some license program in place has a some level of safety and quality controls that are required. They may not explicitly call those out as GMPs, or needing a quality management system, or that you have to implement specific standards, but they do at least have some basic safety and quality controls that are required. Other states go further, and they do reference having to have in place some form of good manufacturing practices, whether that could be including things like corrective actions and preventative actions, or having HACCP in place, which is a hazard analysis with critical control points identified, which we were talking about before. And potentially others go further and say that you have to have a quality management system in place, or that you need to follow specific, say, ISO or ASTM standards. And in other, of course, and in the most extreme state cases, you have states that specifically require conformance with certain CFRs, which then requires you to put in good manufacturing practices that are related to those U.S. laws, federal laws that you're having to comply with on the state level. And implementing GMPs is really a surefire way to make sure that you're complying with those most basic safety and quality control requirements in really whichever regulatory marketplace that you operate in.
Mm-hmm.
In those other marketplaces where you're absolutely required to implement a specific system or certain requirements, that's where working with a group like ASI or CSQ, where we have developed a cannabis-specific program, and we work with our certification body to assist you in making sure that you get that certification, which is effectively a third-party check that you've done those things that your state said you needed to, and effectively is a way of verifying that you're in compliance.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's awesome. What about in terms of, and I mean, it all kind of relates to some extent to compliance, but we talk about, will also help you prevent, from having some sort of safety incident, like where you might have to recall products. Does it also help you prevent those things from happening? Just you've got all these best practices in place, you're doing them reinforcing them, doing them all the time. You're reducing the chances of something unfortunate happening, I would imagine.
Well, it will absolutely, right? But you can't prevent everything from happening, right? So you're mitigating those chances. You are increasing your likelihood of not having a recall or a problem occurring where you might need to withdraw product from the marketplace. But there are really two different types of businesses that exist, right? There are those that have had a recall and those that will. So planning for those and being ready for them is another critical part here. Almost every state has a recall requirement. You have to have your recall protocols in place and be ready for that when it occurs. That's, again, another aspect of good manufacturing practices. And implementing this full program, again, just gives you more visibility of this so that when it occurs, you're able to more efficiently remove product from the marketplace and inform consumers of the potential issue that has arisen. So that you're protecting consumers, you are doing your due diligence as an operator, and really providing, again, that legitimacy and stability to the marketplace.
That's awesome. Well, I thought maybe we could kind of dive a little bit into sort of the kind of the how-to portion of this talk. And I thought, Tyler, maybe you could explain. So, if there aren't these federally mandated best good practices, how do people in the industry determine what they should do? Like, if there's not the list that everybody has, how do you figure it out?
Yeah, great question. And first and foremost, just because GMPs are not mandated for cannabis companies federally, does not mean they're not required locally. And Darwin just kind of touched on that a little bit ago. So there are several states that have adopted the GMP requirements from either food, dietary supplements, or pharmaceuticals, or a mixture of those industries. But while cannabis is not legally classified as any of these products, there are cannabis products that fall into each one of these categories. You have products that are being infused with food, edibles, right? So they fall under CFR 117. You have products that are really, in pill format and either it's more similar to a dietary supplement. So they fall under CFR 111. So I think it's important for manufacturers to follow the applicable GMPs to whatever their final products are. So that might mean that you might have several different types of GMP best practices to follow. One for food, one for dietary supplements, one for cosmetics, for example. Or you can become certified to a certification program like CSQ, which encompasses all of those different things, right? Because it's a global standard. So we're looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at, what are the core principles of GMPs across all of these different products? Are you compliant to them? And then also, are you compliant to the specific things that are your specific to your finished product? So again, edibles, dietary supplements, cosmetics, etc.
So what would be the first steps if somebody wants to implement these practices, or like you're saying, okay, we're going to do things right now in this company, or meet these standards they have in other industries? What would you say is kind of the first sort of steps for doing so?
Yeah, so there's several steps to implementing a successful GMP program, but the first and foremost step should be conducting a pre-assessment or what we call a gap analysis. And basically what that does is that gives you a snapshot of where your facility, where your organization is today, compared to where it needs to go tomorrow to become compliant to GMPs, right? So, for example, we're going to go into a facility and we're going to basically do a mock run of an audit. And that's if you pay a company like ASI to do it on your behalf. You can certainly do it internally as well, but you need to make sure that you have the competent people if you are going to do it internally. So let's just use the example of using a third party like ASI. So what's going to happen in that first step is we're going to send somebody on site who's already a certified auditor for that scheme, whether it's GMP, CSQ, et cetera. And they're going to do a mock run of the audit. And what that does is says, okay, if this was a real audit today, this is kind of where you stand. This is everything you need to fix. And that should be the first step any business takes, because it gives you the roadmap you need to take on your journeys to being GMP certified. And so once that first step is out of the way, now you know what you need to do to implement a good program. Now it's time to start implementing those things. So again, you can use internal or external resources to do so. Just depends on what competency you have in your facility and your organization. And from there, you start working on those things. So you have a list of nonconformances from that gap analysis, from that pre-assessment that tells you, okay, I know I need to work on section 2.1 of the code. Okay, I know I need to work on section 3.3 of the code, et cetera. And you just start working on those things. And at the end of the day, all of those things that you build on, your GMPs, your SOPs, the forms that you use that are in relation with your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, the training that goes involved in that, all of that becomes your GMP program. And a lot of people think that it stops at certification. However, that's not the last step of GMPs. It's certainly not the last step of being GMP certified, because once you've taken that step to okay, here are the things I've corrected, I have my GMP program implemented, now I'm going to go for my certification. Okay, well, what happens after certification? We tell you, okay, here are some things you need to fix. You're going to submit corrective actions into your certification body. You're going to fix those things, and the cycle starts over. It is all about continuous improvement. So really, your journey to GMPs never ends, and it's always about continuous improvement. And so again, just to kind of summarize, your first step let's do a check to see where you are today with either a pre-assessment or gap analysis. Let's fix those things you need to fix. Implement your policies and procedures. Then the next step is certification, and then you start the cycle over again. Of course, there's minor and small steps in between those, but that kind of is the big picture. And again, it's all about continuously improving your systems and your processes. It's never ending.
Mm-hmm. And what is the role in terms of, because there's all different sizes of companies, some are smaller, some are larger than others. Maybe they don't have dedicated staff to focus specifically on GMPs. Is it something maybe that's best if it's sort of everybody plays a part, everybody on the front line, everybody knows that on a daily basis, it's something that's instilled that they reinforce at all times. It's not like, that department does that. I don't mess with that. It's not. That's not
No, not. It takes the whole company and every person, and not just those who are full-time employees of that company, but your vendors as well. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So let's say, you use a third-party company for pest control. What if your pest control technician comes into your facility, does their inspection, and they're not following the GMP policies that your company has set? Well, now they could have potentially contaminated the product. So it goes beyond your facility even, but it is a top-down approach. You do need a management commitment to even start this journey towards GMPs. And you have to have them ready and willing to give the resources needed to develop a program. Otherwise, you're going to have situations where you're paying a company like ASI to come out and do an inspection to see where you're at. And we're gonna just run you through the ringer, and you're nowhere near it. And if you don't have support from senior leadership, that's just the way it's going to be. But it also takes it takes the whole community, right? It takes the frontline workers, it takes the sanitation employees, it takes the maintenance team. Everybody needs to be on board, and you really need to build a culture around safety and quality. And in the food industry, we actually now have that built into the requirements. Ben, I know you're familiar with food safety culture, and GFSI really rolling this out to the schemes and highlighting how important that is, because as the food industry, we realized that if everybody's not on board, if we don't have buy-in from every single employee, then we're never going to reach our goal. And so I think we're going to see that, and we're starting to see that trend in cannabis, where senior leaders in the company, they want to have higher quality products. They want to ensure their products are safer. And when you have that buy-in, okay, then you can install a culture around safety and quality and ensure that you're living and breathing it, walking the talk every day. And so, yeah, it takes the whole team to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add to that, right, that your quality management system can really be only as effective as your weakest link, right? And that weak link can be at any part of your company's organizational structure.
That makes perfect sense. You got to have everybody on board. So, Darwin, I was wondering if, in terms of certification, and why do it? Obviously, we're talking about what, but also, I guess, who with? Because I mean, what makes a good certification body? Like, there's some that are accredited, there's some that are not. They're not all created equally, I imagine. Obviously, there's CSQ, then there's some other types, obviously. How would you describe how somebody would find or know what's a good certification body?
Well, great question, really. And it's kind of two factors, right? It's not just the certification body, but it's also the program itself, right? There both exists accredited and unaccredited certifications that are available for licensed operators right now, whether you're on the marijuana or hemp side of the coin. And there's a substantial real, difference between those two. And the difference really being that, unaccredited certifications are not evaluated to determine the robustness of their conformity assessments. And basically, that means that anyone could issue them. So like an unaccredited certification is kind of like when you're trying to become an official leprechaun hunter. So you might fill out that type of certificate online, right? And print out that you're now an official leprechaun hunter, right? That's basically what an unaccredited certification is, and kind of how unaccredited certification bodies work, right? Whereas on the other end of that, accredited certifications are evaluated to determine the robustness of their conformity assessments. And we have to conform with established international standards for that. And then our accredited certifications, right, that kind of defaults and means that can only be issued by an accredited certification body.
Yeah, and Ben, if I could just add to that as well, I think another way to look at it is imagine a consulting, somebody who has their independent consulting company, and they're going out and they're helping these cannabis businesses become compliant with GMPs, which is a very important part of the process. Well, they might also say, well, I can also audit you to and give you a GMP certificate. Well, now we have an issue where the consultant who wrote your program for you is going out and also doing the audit and auditing their own work, right? And so you can see a conflict of interest there. This type of thing is not allowed to happen in accredited certification bodies. We cannot do the consulting and send the same person out to go do the audit. It doesn't make sense because, like I said, they're auditing their own work. So I think it's a very important piece of it. And to your question earlier of what should you be looking for in a CV, accreditation is only one of those pieces. I also think it's transparency, transparency on things like fees and things like that. There's a lot of I'll say competitors. I don't really think they're competitors in my mind, but of our competitors out there that charge fees for each nonconformance that you get, because that costs additional time for them to review. And that might not be something that the client is aware of until after the audit is complete. And now they have 20 nonconformances and the cost of their audit has gone up, right? So that's one thing. And lastly, I would just say, look for reputable businesses, right? So not only are they accredited, but are they reputable? talk to your friends in the industry, see who they're using, see what their feedback is about them. Is that company doing 100% remote audits, or are they actually coming on site and giving you a good evaluation? So I think there's a number of things to look at. Accreditation is probably number one, but things like transparency on hidden fees, reliability in the marketplace. So again, asking your peers on who they use and why or why they don't like them. It all goes into choosing the right certification body.
Right. So it's not a matter of just like picking one at random. They're all the same. Doesn't matter. This one's the cheapest. Let me run with it. And then, it's just checked off that box. No, you actually got to do do a little homework, like anything really worthwhile. Well, for somebody who hasn't done the homework, I guess, how would you describe, Tyler, how does CSQ what did you base the standard on, and how did you build it?
Yeah, so the development of the standard, it's pretty boring. It's just like any other standard out there, right? You have a bunch of industry stakeholders. So for CSQ specifically, we had people from the packaging side of the industry, from the operator side of the industry, the consulting side, the training. So all of these people come together with the goal of developing a standard that's harmonized and that sees every piece and bit of the industry working together. And so we get all these stakeholders together. We develop standards. We develop them according to ISO guidelines. There's hundreds of ISO standards out there around developing standards. So that we follow those processes. It goes out for public comment. So it's not just a group of individuals or a couple of companies that make the rules. It does go out to public comment. We have to respond to every single comment, no matter how absurd it is. It could say, well, I don't like this just because I don't like this. And we have to give a formal response to that, right? So it's a very long and tedious process, as Darwin knows, as we're going through some revisions right now. But it is a very thorough process for a reason. And so, again, it's not just me or Darwin making the rules. It's the industry collectively coming together, saying this is what we think they should be. This is what makes sense to ensure consumers are safe and products are made with high quality standards, as well as ensuring that the barrier to entering the market isn't overburdensome or going to restrict those small businesses and mom and pop operators from entering the space. So all of those things go into our thoughts and the development of the standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you want to make it stringent, but not something that companies can't implement. Obviously.
Exactly. We don't want it just for the top 1% of the businesses, right? It's got to be. It's very hard to do in standard development, but it needs to be a one size fit all scenario, and that's why you see a lot of times vague requirements in standards, not just our standards, but standards generally, because it has to work for a small company in the United States. It has to work for a big company in Canada, has to work for a company in Africa. And so we have to take in all of those considerations when developing these standards and not just look at it through the lens of our local regions or our local standards.
Yeah.
What does the standard say about the role of training and education for your team? Not just in terms of like how they train to implement the standard, but just in terms of just in the workplace, the role of safety and training. How does that play out?
Well, training is critical, and I would say it's one of the foundational elements of good manufacturing practices as well. Everyone who performs a function within the business, especially if that directly relates to consumer safety and product quality, needs to have formal training defined and needs to then be evaluated that they've actually gotten that training and can perform their job function, especially in the extraction field. So when you're producing cannabinoid substances, this is like other heavy industries. There can be pressurized gases, there can be things under vacuum, under pressure.
Oh, we lose Darwin.
Safety issues associated with performing your duties that also directly impact the safety of the product themselves. So training is, I guess that's that's one way of saying that it's very important, and absolutely should be each of your roles really needs to have defined responsibilities and then the training required for each of them, and probably a proficiency program set up or a continuing education or reassessment that those employees that have these critical functions are performing them adequately.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add to that, Ben. Sure. We were talking about, is it senior leaders? Is it frontline employees? Is it does it take a village to implement GMPs and quality management systems? And I think training is a big piece of that, right? As well. If we give our team the appropriate training that they need, now they have accountability over their own work, over the program that we've implemented. Whereas if we just implement the program and don't train anyone on how to do it, that makes it very tough, right? And it makes it very tough for that frontline employee to be held accountable for their actions if they haven't been trained appropriately, right? So training should be, every section of GMPs or every module of GMPs, whatever you want to call it, there's a training component in each one of those sections. We can't just have a recall program and then never train anybody on it. We can't just have a preventive maintenance program and never train anyone on it. So it is, to Darwin's point, it is very, very important, and it's ingrained into GMPs and quality management systems in general.
Yeah, I think it ties into what you were saying just a few minutes ago. Just that principle of it doesn't stop there. Like you got to keep training and repracticing for these things. With good manufacturing practices, it's not like all right, we did all this, we're done. No, you got to. It's a process. It's ongoing, whatever to word it. Well, before we get out of here, I thought I'd ask you guys. Let's start with you, Tyler. If somebody wants to get CSQ certified and wants to meet those standards, what would be their first steps? I would shoot you guys an email or start looking at what they need and what your company's.
Yeah, I think the easiest way is definitely give us a call. We're here to help you through the process every step of the way. Our slogan is "We make certification easy," and we try to hold true to that. So the best thing you can do is call us, go to our email, submit an online form, however you want to do it. But reach out to us, ask questions, because we're here to answer them, to the best of our ability. We're not here to provide any free consultation, but at the same time, we're here to help you through each step of that certification process. So give us a call, find out what are your goals, and that will be part of the conversation. And then we can kind of give you a roadmap of where you need to go from point A to point C and how to get there.
Yeah, I would just add to that our website also has a bunch of free resources on there. You can find all of our standards there, as well as all of our audit requirements and checklists for our programs, which, as Tyler was mentioning earlier, maybe that very first step is just checking out what is all included in our certification, and maybe conducting your first preliminary audit, self-assessment against the checklists that we have. And we also have training materials that could be available to help those who really want to try to take this on themselves better understand what that means to actually conduct a first-person audit or a self-assessment. And then from there, absolutely encourage you to reach out to us. info@csqcertification.com is a great way to drop us an email. You can visit the website. Hopefully scan the fancy QR code thingy will work and get you to our website as well. You can also find us on LinkedIn, where we're also posting resources and really trying to provide licensed operators with with tools and that they can use to have the greatest likelihood of success.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's what it's all about. We're trying to help people do things, with more safety, quality, consistency, help them get where they need to be. So here's where you all can check out how to get a hold of Tyler or Darwin or the CSQ team. Also on our online e-commerce store, the workshops, WURKSHOP, we offer 3 different CSQ courses there: the CSQ Lead Auditor Training, Cannabis Safety 101, and CSQ 101. So definitely go check those out. And then also just in terms of this theme about safety and training for safety and risk assessment, that's really at the core of what we do in terms of best practices and doing things in a safe way that mitigates risk. All types of tools from the internal auditing tools to help you audit yourself before you get audited, checklists that take your team through safety and compliance, assessments to verify and validate how your employees are doing when it comes to training, compliance, and all those tasks. And record keeping, obviously very important for tracking what you have done and if you can prove it, and what you haven't done, obviously. And then just training that puts employees constantly in this path and this culture of safety and just getting better and making sure things are done the way they should be. So all really crucial, whether you're in cannabis or all types of other industries. And yeah, I appreciate you guys being here today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
Ben.
Yeah, anytime. And go check out CSQ, guys, and we'll see you at the next one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Live long and process.
Absolutely.